He was also very curious about why is it some days I cannot even get out of bed, my knee hurts so bad, and I could only wobble, when other days I could stand fine. And then he started to look deeply at the emotional, psychosocial component. If you're running for survival, of course your knees go to work. But if you have time to just relax and maybe things aren't so good inside, that his knee started to swell and act up more. And so he started to look, he basically wasn't even thinking about developing a method. He was just so concerned about using his knee again that he started to realize the connection. When he stood up and his anti-gravity muscles became engaged, like the ones of your low back, the paraspinal muscles, and the ones of his hamstrings, when he stood up for a while, they started to become engaged. And so what he did is he laid down, without gravity position, and that's where he could learn best about how to move his muscles in a way where these muscles were not being engaged. And then he learned that when he was then able to stand without contracting the same muscles, it affected his walking and his knee. And so then pretty soon he just laid for hours and hours doing really exploratory motions to see, well, at what point do my muscles engage, and what do I need to do to release it? And so several years later, that's the origin of the Feldenkrais method, and now it's used all around the world. So in today's workshop, we're going to talk a lot, we're going to focus on the neurology of the brain and how it helps to reprogram our body, and the extraordinary capacity you have to retrain yourself to move, think, and function more efficiently. So go ahead and lay down on your back. So anytime you're laying on your back, if you want to bend your knees, if it's more comfortable, that's perfectly fine. So we begin every lesson by just doing a gentle exploration, checking in with how we're lying here. Sort of like a meditation or a vipassana. So notice, first of all, how your breathing is. Where do you breathe in your body? And where is it inhibited? I work a lot with computer users, and the pattern with them is to inhibit the movement in the ribs and in their chest. Now pretend like you're lying on a human Xerox machine, and it starts at your head, where the light goes on, and it goes downward from your head. And I want you to ask yourself, what is going to be the darkest part of the paper? In other words, what part of your body is heaviest into the ground? So imagine that line of the Xerox machine coming down through your shoulders, through your upper back. What is the imprint that your body is making on the ground? Let's take a look at your low back. How high off the ground is your low back? And is there a difference between the right side and the left side? And then how about behind your thighs? How much of the back of your leg is in contact with the ground? And is there a difference between the right side and the left side? And how about behind your knees? And all the way to your ankles? And do you notice that there's any tension in the muscles between your legs? Lots of times we have tension that we're not even aware of. So maybe just once, take one toe inward and then release it out and alternate. And see if you were secretly holding any tension between your legs that you didn't notice at first. And then just relax your legs. If your feet turn just a little bit more outward, then that means yes, you were. Notice if one leg is longer than the other, and if so, that's perfectly fine, because that's going to change in this lesson. And now let's draw a line, the line of your spine. I do these like chiropractic x-rays. I do it in my mind and with my hand. So just imagine, let's start from the back of your head, the occiput, the area that touches the ground. Imagine that you're taking your hand down your spine. Notice if the top vertebra is it turned more to one side or the other. Well, actually, that's a trick question because the top vertebra is actually inside your skull. But anyways, as you travel down to your upper cervical vertebra, notice how high each one is off the ground. Go one by one. And notice which vertebra is actually the highest off the ground of your neck. And how high, and yeah, go ahead and put your hand under your neck just to feel what is that space. How high is it? And then as you continue to travel down your cervical vertebra, at what point does your body touch the ground again? And also notice, is your vertebra of your neck angled more to the right or to the left? Ask yourself, is your nose pointed more to the right or more to the left, or is it in the middle? And is the direction that your nose is pointing, does it correlate to your neck? Now, as you do all these observations of your body, I suggest doing it without judgment. Like, yeah, I'm really turned there. And, instead just notice what your patterns are. Because when we go with our patterns, that's the most effective way to evoke change. So like starting with being okay with where you are. So continue traveling your imaginary hand down. So now it's in the top of your, where the top of your vertebra are. The top of your shoulder blades are. And continue traveling down between your shoulder blades in your imagination. What's the shape of your vertebra? How high are they? How angled are they? Keep traveling down to your mid-back. Now you might notice some parts of your mid-back are flatter. And keep traveling down. Now we're coming to your low back. And all the way down to your tailbone. And then very gently roll your head to the right, staying in the range of comfort, just to see how far it goes easily and effortlessly. Come back to the middle, and then roll the other way. Most people have preferences, like one side that they go to easier than the other. And then come back to the middle and take a rest. Now I'm going to have you roll onto your belly. Okay, good. There you are. You can switch it out with theirs. Okay, so let's all have our head turned to the left, okay? Go ahead and turn your head to the left. Okay, good. And what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to bend your knees so the soles of your feet are facing up towards the ceiling, parallel to the ceiling. Okay, good. And bring your knees together. Good. Now, remembering to go super slow and to stay in your range of comfort, I'd like you to tilt your feet, keeping your knees glued together, like there's a rope around your knees. Go ahead and tilt your feet to the right. And then just go a little bit, and then come back to the middle. Do this several times. And by the way, I am going to come around and do a little hands-on for everybody. The hands-on doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. When I do hands-on, it gives the brain proprioceptive information about where you are in space. So go very slow, tilting your feet to the right, only to the right, and then back to the center. It's going at your own pace, and see if you can make it smooth as opposed to jerky. With all the movements I ask you to do, go slow. And anytime if you want to take a break from the movements before I say to, that's fine as well. Going to the right and then back to the center. And what you're doing is you're having your awareness on what parts are involved in the tilting of your feet. Which vertebra, would you say, of your spine are involved in the gentle tilting? For most of us, when we first start off, it's only our low back, and that's fine. But you're going to be amazed by how fast your brain will learn to incorporate more parts of yourself. And the good thing about that is then, okay, take a rest, let your legs go long. The good thing about that is then it distributes the work to other muscles, so then our movements become more effortless and free. I'd like you to do the same motion again, same direction. So once again, very gently tilting your feet to the right. And as you do this, ask yourself, do I inhibit my breath anywhere? Do I halt my breath as I'm doing this tilting? And as you do more and more, you could start to ask yourself, do more parts of myself, like maybe your mid-vertebra, mid-back, do more parts start to get involved with the motion? And do it one more time, and then go ahead and roll back onto your back and take a rest on your back. So the floor is kind of like the feedback monitor that lets you know what's changed. So when you come onto your back, you could come into that place of self-exploration and discovery, where now the question is, what's the difference between your right side and your left side, just from that very minor movement? Does one side of your back feel slightly closer to the ground than the other? And if you don't notice much difference yet, that's perfectly fine, because we just did a very little bit of a movement. Ask yourself, how's your pelvis? Does one side feel heavier into the ground than the other? And is your breathing starting to expand and relax? And very gently roll your head to the right and then once to the left. Go slow and see if there's any difference now in one side. I see some of you going to the full range, so I want you to stop before you get to that point. So the range of comfort. That means you don't have to push just a little bit more to get there. Okay, roll back onto your belly. This time, turn your head to the left. Put your left hand on top of your right, and you could put your hands either under your right ear, or if it's more comfortable, you could lay them beside you. Okay. So the head is to the left, same direction with your head. Okay. Now this time I'd like you to have a little space between your legs, like about hips width apart with your legs. Go ahead and bend your knees so your feet are parallel to the ceiling. They don't have to be perfectly parallel, but somewhat. And then go ahead and tilt them once again to the right, going slow, going slow. Because your body is going to learn much faster if you go slower. So notice what's going on in your pelvis. And if you're having any jerkiness in the motions, it probably means you have to go slower or you have to go less. A little bit less. So do this a few more times. And as you're doing this, I'm going to introduce you to the first neurological principle. So do it about 3 more times and then take a rest. When we're born with a certain number of hardwired reflexes. Basically, you might not know this, but when you're born, you have all the neurons that you're going to use for your entire life. Take a rest. However, they're not connected like they don't have any meaning to them. So what happens is our neural connections, we have some reflexes, like if you shine a bright light at a baby, they'll bring their hands to their chest, and that's a reflex that usually develops a few days after birth. However, most all the movements are discovered. Like we teach ourselves, and we have to teach ourselves according to our environment, depending on what kind of environment you're in. So if you grew up in an environment with your parents fighting all the time, and maybe there's a lot of kids, a lot of siblings that you have, your motor movements are going to be learned, like accordingly. Maybe you didn't have a lot of food when you were growing up, or maybe you were running from the Nazis or whatever. Whatever is going on in your environment, your nervous system is going to adapt accordingly. And not only that, but as a baby, you're going to learn to model a lot of the behaviors of those closest to you, like your mother. So if your mother had a lot of fear response, like I'll speak for myself, my mom was worried. Worry is her thing. She worries about every little thing. And so I had to heal that. Actually, I spent a lot of my life healing my worry. Like everything was just like, oh my God, it's just too much. How am I going to do on this test? And it affected my breathing. It affected my movements. Everything was so tight towards my core. So I've had to retrain not only my mind, but I've had to retrain my body around that as well. Okay, so go ahead and bend your knees. Keep your knees a good distance apart, just like how it is now. And I'd like you to do that same motion, tilting to the right, and see how far you could go to the right comfortably. See what's happening with your pelvis. And see how many of your vertebrae are now organized in this direction. See how easily that left side of the pelvis just wants to lift. Just lift, like wee. Yeah, when you get to that fun stage, then you know it's okay. If you get to that effortful stage where you maybe halt your breath, then it's like, okay, maybe doing a little less is better. Okay. So maybe do 3 or 4 more times, going at your own pace. Yeah. So you want your ankles relaxed. So I'm going to actually come over and put my hands on you right now. You're all doing, so far everybody, it looks like they're doing it great, everybody I'm watching. So let's just go over to this side and then back to the middle. Easy, effortless movement. Okay, so there's a little bit of, I'm holding in here for you, and that's your breath. That's holding on a little bit. So as you get more familiar with the movement and your body starts to learn, it'll go easier and easier. And see if you're able to go just a little bit further now without exerting more muscle effort. So we're constantly learning how to move without more muscle effort. Less is best. Do it one more time and then go ahead and roll onto your back and take a rest. And as you're laying on your back, once again, check in. What's different now? I just put your glasses over here. Yeah. So now we're going to talk a little bit about our brain maps. So our brains have kind of like a map, just like a map about the city map. In our brains, we have a pictorial map which locates and describes every part of ourselves. The size of each part of the map is concordant with the amount of sensory and motor stimuli it receives, and not according to the actual body size. So what that means is the parts of ourselves which we use the most and with the most dexterity, such as our tongue and our index finger, the parts of ourselves that have the most motor and sensory stimuli, they are the parts that have the most cortical activity or clarity in our brain maps.
when a body part is injured or underutilized, such as after a knee injury or a back injury, or if we're just sitting at our office in a chair and we're scooted forward away from the back support and we're tightening our low back muscles, then most likely this part of our body will become smaller and our brain maps of this region will shrink. So in these Feldenkrais awareness through movement lessons, you will be attuned to the subtle changes in your sensitivity level. And this in turn is what clarifies for us our brain maps.
So as you're moving, you might notice for a lot of people it's like their mid-back or their low back that's really out of their awareness. And so I'm going to come around and try to touch these parts of you, but use your own attention on these parts, like what's going on? I have a hard time feeling this part. As it becomes more clear and back into your brain map, then you could start to involve it in your movement, such as like reaching your arm forward to grab a glass of water. You want all the parts of your back to be involved. If you've had any injury, like a knee injury or ankle, chances are you're holding around that area. And over time, guaranteed, your brain map of that area will decrease. Okay, go ahead and turn back onto your belly. And this time, turn your head to the right. And bend your knees. Have your feet in the same position. So actually, let's start by bringing them close together. Okay? So there's a rope around your knees holding them together. And go ahead and tilt your feet to the same side. So that's to the right. And go slow, because you might not be able to go as far as you did in the last motion. And I want you to ask yourself, why? Why is it that I can't move as far? What's happening in my mid-back and in my upper back area? And for some of you, you might find it uncomfortable to have your head like this for very long, so we won't stay like this for very long. But also you might find that it's going to become a lot more comfortable. If you have a neck tightness, today is going to be a good one for you, but then again, listen to yourself. If you have a lot of neck tightness, it just might be too much. Okay, so take a brief rest here, legs long. If you want to just turn your head to the other side for just a moment, that's fine, especially if you have neck tightness. Okay, and then turn your head back to the right. And this time, let's have our knees about hips width apart. Go ahead and same position with your feet. And go ahead and do the same tilting to the right. And now ask yourself what's different with your legs in this position. It's a slightly different orientation of your vertebra, especially as it comes up to your cervical vertebra. So most people think when they have a tight neck, they have to stretch their neck. But you know, I find the most effective way to increase the range in the neck is to work all the parts underneath the neck. So it's sort of like you're doing a gentle mobilization. If you've ever had therapy or chiropractic, you'll know what I mean by mobilization, a joint mobilization, moving one part against the other. And remember, you could stop at any time, even before I say to take a rest. Do it one more time, and then roll onto your back and take a rest. So as you're laying here on your back, you might feel an even greater difference between how your right vertebra, your right low back, and your left are lying here. You might notice one hip a little lower than the others, than the other. And you might notice one leg is a little bit closer to the ground than the other. Just explore for yourself, because actually everybody's different and everybody's going to feel something a little different. I'm going to explain the next neurological principle. And this is one of neuromodulation is the word for it. This is the balance between the excitation and the inhibition of your nervous system. It's essential to quiet the noisy brain for healing and for functioning in life, basically. But Feldenkrais aims to direct our attention to the parasympathetic nervous system, the resting and digesting, because that's when your nervous system learns best and is most adaptable to change. So certain people are sensitive to outside stimulation, and certain people are numb and immune to it. So what happens is, for most of us, like due to traumas, or we all have traumas throughout our life, what happens is it turns on our nervous system, which is also known as the reticulating activating system, which is a part of our brain and our nervous system that is like the on switch, and it's got to fire. It's like, take action, the danger's around, or get this project done. When the on switch gets turned on, then muscles are activated, which is fine at certain times, right? But the problem is oftentimes we are uncertain how to turn that switch off. And what happens is when we habitually start to tense certain muscles, like our protective muscles, which are the muscles closest to our core, our breathing, our paraspinals, or our eyes and our toes and our inner thighs, that we lose our ability to know if the switch is turned on and turned off. This is the root of chronic pain today, and this is why the work I do is so effective with treating chronic pain, is because I simply, in our sessions, teach people to learn the difference between the turning on and the turning off. Now, most people who have low back tightness and pain, people won't know what I mean or how to turn it off. They'll understand the concept, but they just won't know how. And so when I work with people, I teach them how to move whatever, their knee or the movements that we're doing now, to a point where they could then start to learn how to teach the brain how to do that same motion, whether it's getting out of bed or walking forward, things as simple as this, without having the switch on. And I've had remarkable success with, fibromyalgia and other chronic pain diagnoses. And this is my secret sauce, is I teach them how to turn off that switch. And then I teach them how to leave when they leave our sessions. Usually when someone has chronic pain, my first homework I give them is just to be aware of when the switch is turned on versus off, when they're engaging those muscles versus releasing them. So you could ask yourself right now, well, what is the on switch that I have for myself? Is it my low back? If you have low back tightness or pain, absolutely it is. How about your toes? I mean, as you age, you will have more and more on switch. Just look at your parents, it's like, oh, wow, I don't want to get there. And so bring your awareness to those parts of yourself and see if just you can invite some breath into this area. That's one tip. And softness. And as we continue to do the movement, I want you to be aware of these parts and aware of if you're contracting or relaxing those parts. And if you are contracting, it's okay. It's your habit. I don't expect you to break your habits right on the spot. Awareness is the first step. The second step is to explore what you could do to not contract those muscles, like maybe a little smaller, slower. Okay, go ahead and roll onto your belly. Turn your head to the left. Have your knees and your legs a comfortable distance apart. Bend your knees, same position as before. And we're going to do the same tilting to the right. This time put your right hand on top of your left. Put your right hand under your right ear unless it's uncomfortable, and then it's fine to position your arms another way. Go ahead and tilt your feet to the right. So with that new awareness of yourself, see how well the movement travels through your spine. Just leave your bag here. There's a bag. Do it several times. And if you're ever curious about what efficient movement looks like, or how you should be moving, watch a baby move. It's basically, we're in a process of unlearning all the unhelpful movements we've learned throughout our lifetime. Do it 3 more times and see if you can go a little bit further with comfort and ease. And then take a rest, legs long. Now, muscular effort, the inverse relationship between effort and feeling. In other words, the sound-noise ratio. If I dropped a pin in this room, you would hear it. But out there, not a chance. Okay. So now what I'd like you to do is turn your head to the right, which it is for most of you. And I'd like you to put your right hand in the push-up position. That means your right hand is flat and your elbow is somewhere up towards the ceiling. Great. And now go ahead and bend your knees. Soles of the feet are facing towards the ceiling. Put your right hand up in the push-up position. Put your left arm along by your side. Okay, good. Now you're going to tilt your feet to the left. There's a point where you'll know to give a very gentle push through your hand. But you don't want to do an effortful push, of course. Just you'll get to the point of tilting where you'll think, oh, if I just gave a gentle push through my right hand, perhaps I could tilt my feet just a little bit more to the left, which will then allow my right pelvis to just pick up a little bit more. And maybe you want to play around with the position of your right hand, and that's fine. Maybe for some of you it's a little bit higher with your hand. And if you want to try tilting just a little bit further and maybe just giving a little bit more of a gentle push with your head, but not so that you halt your breath. One sign that it's too much muscle effort is you'll be halting your breath. Okay, take a rest, let your legs go long, turn your head to the other side. Put your left hand on the ground up by your chin, somewhere comfortable, like as if you're going to do a push-up. And then go ahead and tilt your feet to the right now, to the other way. So same instructions as I just gave. And what's the difference between that vertebra and that vertebra? So you could go as far as it's comfortable and easy. Use your hand. I see actually very few of you actually using your hand to push just a little bit further. So we're teaching our body to just rotate a little bit more to this direction. But you are doing very good at not using a lot of muscle effort, and that's great. You're like already at an advanced level compared to a lot of the classes I teach. And you could think about picking up your left side of your pelvis just a little bit more as you're doing this. And now I want you to think about starting to turn your eyes and look at your left elbow. It's not lifting it, sliding it. Because lifting it is going to contract your neck. But if your goal was just to maybe look at your armpit, let's have that kind of thinking, where you're pushing through your left hand, you're tilting, and then there's a point where it's most easy and effortless to look down at your armpit. And I'd like you to do that. And if you want to slide your head just a little bit through the gap, perfectly fine with me. Go ahead and try it. For some of you, you might want to reposition the position of your hand to have more efficient movement. Good. And when you have it, dial it in. You could go a little bit further, a little bit bigger. It's looking good, everybody. Just do a little bit more. Okay, take a rest on your belly. Pause. We're going to do the other side, so go ahead and set yourself up to do the other side. Now I'm going to actually introduce another concept of neuro retraining. And this is going to be maybe a novel one for a lot of you. The brain cannot think without motor patterning. The brain cannot think without movement. It took me a while to understand this, but there's actually little tiny, they call it saccades, little tiny movements of the eyeball, even with thought. So basically, just thinking through a movement is enough to retrain the brain maps and to increase your sensory differentiation. So that means anytime I'm asking you to do a movement and it just doesn't feel good for whatever reason, it doesn't matter the reason. It doesn't matter if you're pregnant or if you have pain or you're just too tired. You could just think through the motion, and I guarantee this is going to improve your coordination of that motion. Let's try it. Let's get ourselves in the position. So let's put our right hand into the push-up position. Go ahead and bend your knees. Feet pretty much parallel to the ceiling. Reposition your hand. Where's the most efficient place to pitch your hand? Ask yourself. And now I want you to think through the steps without actually doing it. So I want you to think through tilting your feet to the left, your pelvis rolls, your right side of your pelvis lifts, and your ribs all rotate. And then there's just a point where it's like, this is the time to push through my right hand and to look down at my armpit. I want you to go through that again in your mind. And then when you're ready, go ahead and do it. And see if it's easier to do it just because of the fact that you thought through it. So try not to lift your head because that will take muscle effort. But you could slide your head. See if you could slide your head just a little bit more through the gap, like you're looking, oh, what's going on down there? Good. And if you find it's easy, I want you to make it a little bit bigger. Just a little bit bigger. Good. Good. Beautiful. 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 Okay. Do it a little bit bigger. And then there's a point where if you want to lift your right knee off the ground and slide your right leg along your left leg so that your right foot slides behind your left, you could go ahead and do that. Or you could take a break. Totally up to you. So I'll say that again. So you're going to tilt your feet to the left, and then there might be a point where you just feel like I could lift that right knee off the ground and slide it along the left and slide that leg backwards. Good. Yeah. And it's okay if you want, you could think through the motion first and then do it. And I see a lot of you doing that, and that's very intelligent of you to do that. Do one more time if you want to take your knee and slide it all the way back across the other one. Good. Take a rest. Turn your head to the other side. Go ahead and put your left hand into the push-up position. Yeah, your right arm is long by your side. Bend your knees. Have your feet, soles of your feet towards the ceiling. It's more or less parallel. And when you're ready, go ahead. Oh, actually, hold on. I want you to think through the motion. And this is the motion where you're actually looking down through your armpit and you're sliding your left knee along your bottom leg and it slides all the way back, which helps you to actually look over your left side. Guess where we learned this motion from? Babies. Actually, well, that's a lot of where Feldenkrais's, the whole concept of efficient movement is learned through babies. This is how babies, when they see something back there, they just contort their whole spine really intelligently, and they get there. So when you're ready, go ahead and do that motion. You might want to start off slow the first few times. And then when you're ready, you could go with it. Sliding one knee across the other, sliding your right knee and leg back, 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 further along your right foot, along your right side. Good. Yeah, good. Two more times, fast. Okay, take a rest. We're getting ready for the grand finale movement. Okay. All right. I want you to put your forehand on the ground. I want you to put both hands on the ground, both elbows in the push-up position, and bend your knees, stand your feet so they're parallel to the ceiling. And guess what I'm going to ask you to do next? Okay, okay, first of all, I have to take your glasses. Could I take your glasses off? Okay, so your forehead is on the ground. I'll put it back here. Okay? Now I want you to think through the motion before you do it. So you're going to alternate sides. That means, let's start with, you're going to tilt your legs to the left and you're going to push through your right foot. Think about it first. Push through your right foot, look under your right armpit, and you know what to do from there. Slide your leg. And you're going to come back to the middle, and you're going to do the other side. Alternating side to side, just like that. And then when you're ready, go ahead and do it. Start off small the first few times. This is the final movement of the hour. Starting off small. And then when you're ready, you could go bigger and bigger. Let's see some of those knees come off the ground. The top knee slides across the bottom knee and it rotates all the way to the side. And then you're going to alternate and go the other way. Good. Good. Let's take about 10 more seconds if you want to go bigger and bolder and easier side to side. And you don't have to keep your forehead on the ground now. You could start to turn your head side to side. And if you want, you could even try coming all the way up to sitting. Optional. I'll let you play with this for about 30 more seconds. So you could either just stick with this motion, or if you want to try coming up to sitting, you are welcome to do that. Last couple of movements. Ooh, some of you look really playful and graceful. Do your last movement and then go ahead and roll onto your back and take a rest on your back. Good work. You're all going to sleep really well tonight, and you're going to be like, wow, that wasn't even like, I didn't even have a workout there or anything. Why am I sleeping so well all of a sudden? So just check in with yourself now. Ask yourself all the questions I asked you at the beginning. What's different? And very gently roll your head once to the right and once to the left. What's different there? Come back to the middle. Notice what parts of yourself. Let's do the human Xerox machine. From your head, scanning your back all the way down. Now, what parts of yourself are more in contact with the ground? So in a moment, I'm going to have you stand up and walk around. I suggest you sort of stay quiet for the first minute or so to just keep listening to your body and listening and how this lesson is affecting you as you move, like as you walk and stand. Your balance will be shifted. If you feel a little lightheaded when you come up, that's actually a good thing because it just means your nervous system is reorganizing itself, which usually happens actually after Feldenkrais sessions. We're going to take a 10-minute break.